So first of all, I want to thank you for the opportunity. I'm actually a double beneficiary of the JNF. I'm a graduate of this Alexander Muz High School in Israel, in Hod Sharon, which you folks fund. And as an officer and also as a tour operator, I've taken tremendous advantage of your forests and reservoirs and picnic tables all over the country. Israel is safer. Israel is stronger. Israel is more prosperous because of the JNF. And thank you and to all your donors for what you're doing for Israel. I live in Jerusalem. October 7th, I was woken up by sirens, and within 3 hours was already called up to the north. The IDF has always viewed Hezbollah as the main external threat in the area, and Hamas was considered a much more minor threat, which is why 350,000 people were called up that day, and most of us went up north, not down south. And I've actually been up there for the last 8.5 months as a reservist, which is kind of crazy. 70% of the IDF are reservists, and we're still upholding the northern border. The people there are fantastic. People have left their homes, their businesses, their families, their children, and we've been up there for 8.5 months. I want to first talk about the tension between the southern theater with Gaza versus the northern theater in Lebanon. The government gave the IDF a mandate that the main theater is Gaza and the north is the secondary theater. The IDF has stated as late as yesterday that they need about another month in the Rafah area. Basically, the war down there has become more of a guerrilla warfare as more and more Hamas terrorists are killed and more forces are moving up north. Yesterday, the chief of staff approved plans for the Northern Command regarding a potential attack in Lebanon. I want to get into the kishkas a bit about what's happening up north. We've been in a defensive war right now. We've been playing ping pong with Hezbollah. In the last 8 months, we've killed over 400 operatives. 80% of those are Hezbollah. The rest are from Amal, which is another Shiite organization, Hamas, and other Palestinian groups. We've destroyed thousands and thousands of targets in southern Lebanon, as well as in the Baalbek area, which is about 60 miles from the border. We've destroyed weapons depots, command and control centers, bunkers, and approximately 100,000 Lebanese civilians have fled their homes from the south. So on our side, we have about 60,000 civilians who have left, who are living in temporary shelters. And I know that JNF has been very generous in helping support some of these internally displaced refugees, but almost double on the Lebanese side have been evacuated as well. The head of Hezbollah, Nasrallah, who actually an hour ago just gave a major address, he's under a lot of pressure from the Lebanese civilians. There have been thousands of assets destroyed. Like I said before, people aren't home, and he's been under pressure ever since the Syrian civil war, when he sent thousands of soldiers to save Assad's regime from ISIS. 2,000 of his best fighters were killed, and 8,000 of his fighters were wounded. So in the Shiite south, mothers of soldiers who were killed in Syria said to him, if my son dies fighting the Zionists, I can understand that, but our sons died fighting other Muslims. So he went into this war under a lot of pressure. You know, Lebanon has been a fractured society. The economy has collapsed even before the war. And the Lebanese people, the last thing they want is a war with Israel. They've seen pictures of what's happening in Gaza, the destruction in Gaza. Israeli politicians and the Israeli army have stated publicly that Lebanon will be moved back into the Stone Age in the Third Lebanese War, and the Lebanese people don't want that. Nasrallah also does not want a war. If he wanted a war, he would have attacked on October 7th, which he did not. And if he wanted to, the next day or two, it was too late because all of our troops were already amassed on the border, and we've been there ever since. Israel has stated that we don't want a war either. So it's kind of like it's almost seeing two cars on a highway and who's gonna duck first, who's playing the game of chicken. The IDF can't stop maneuvering in Gaza until the hostages are released, and Hezbollah will not stop shooting towards Israel until the IDF stops maneuvering in Gaza, right? So the army spokesperson Hagari has stated many times that the IDF cannot engage in a rescue operation, which will get the remaining 120 hostages, dead or alive, home. The 7 hostages that have been rescued have been in crack commando type operations, and it's not feasible to get all 120 back in that manner. So in essence, the U.S. has sent a mediator this week to the region to try and make a deal, but it's the Army's opinion that as long as we continue maneuvering in Gaza, Nasrallah is going to keep shooting. He's basically been using 4 types of arsenal on the border. He's been shooting rockets, he's been shooting anti-tank missiles, mortar shells, as well as UAVs and drones. The UAV and drones is a new type of warfare, and the world first witnessed it 2 years ago when Russia invaded Ukraine. This is something we're learning and adapting. Many of you maybe have seen yesterday the video that Hezbollah put out of a drone flying over northern Israel and Haifa. The Israeli Air Force was following that drone, and the reason it was not shot down is because we did not want to create any damage over populated areas. There are drones that have explosives and drones that have cameras. This drone had a camera. So in essence, we've had about 9,000 rockets and missiles fired from Lebanon into northern Israel. It's quite unprecedented. The amount of explosive has far surpassed what was fired from Gaza to Israel. You know, Hamas is more like a junior varsity team, a JV team, and Hezbollah is a professional sports franchise. It's a whole different league. It'll be a completely different war with Hezbollah. So right now we're playing a very strong game of defense with forces constantly attacking every single day. We have jet fighter strikes and artillery strikes into Lebanon, killing Hezbollah activists. We killed several today, and they're responding. They've unfortunately killed around 30 Israelis, including 10 civilians. And many of those soldiers were killed in the first 2 weeks of the war, where we paid a learning tax before we were adapted to the new tactics that have been in this war. This is where we stand right now. Regarding the soldiers, you know, I keep telling my wife I'm surrounded by complete excellence. We have soldiers ages 25 to 60 in all capacities, religious, secular, Ashkenaz, Sephardi, in favor of judicial reform, against judicial reform. Everyone is fighting together with lots of harmony. In the Army, in our command rooms, we have no data, we have no phones with us. And it's amazing the unity we have inside the IDF. And when we come home for a day a week or 2 days a week, we see all the madness, all the protests, and it's very foreign to us because we're very focused on our mission up north. So this has been the longest war in Israel's history since the War of Independence. I joked to my wife when I left in October, I'll be home soon. Then I joked I'll be home for Hanukkah. Then I joked I'll be home for Purim. Then I said I'd be home for the Seder. And now I'm in June. And I've stopped talking to my wife about when I'm coming home. It's really a very unstable situation. Visitors who come to the country who don't go up north and don't go to the Gaza area would have no idea the country's in war. There's traffic everywhere. Businesses are booming. There's construction cranes. But for those of us up north or down south, we're in the thick of things. And basically, we're hoping we need to have clarity soon. The 60,000 civilians that are displaced, their kids start school here on September 1st. So if you're a parent to a young family and you've relocated to a hotel in Tel Aviv or Jerusalem or Haifa, you're thinking now, where am I registering my kids for school? It's only 2.5 months away. So this is something that the government needs to tell the Army to do sooner than later, because otherwise the kids will lose another academic year. We know that the north of the country, we call it the periphery, the economy is basically agriculture and tourism, and both don't exist. A, there's no tourists up north, and B, there were no working hands up north to work the farms. Unlike the South, which had thousands of volunteers because it was much safer, up north is still pretty scary. I walk around all day in a flak jacket and a helmet. So we have 2.5 months to get these families back. If the war goes past September, I'm very concerned about what's going to happen with the population up north if they're going to head back, because people have already gotten to a routine in the center of the country. And in essence, the north has become a security zone of Israel. In the 1990s, I fought in Lebanon when we occupied the south of Lebanon in a security zone. And now it's hard for me to believe that we're in a security zone within Israel. This is a whole different situation that we're not used to. David Ben-Gurion's doctrine were quick wars and always in the enemy territory. And now we're in the longest war in our history, and we're in Israel. The Army's decision to evacuate the 60,000 people on October 8th and 9th has been second-guessed. And hindsight's 2020, but we were afraid of a Nukhba-style invasion up north. We were afraid of what Hamas did down south would happen up north. The Gaza border is straight and flat and small. It's a rectangle. And up north, it's all valleys and mountains and ridges. It's a much, much more difficult border. Parts of the border don't even have a fence. So that was our main concern, which is why we evacuated the citizens. But it's time to bring them back. And they can't move back until there's two things accomplished. One is we move the Hezbollah forces 8 to 10 kilometers from the border to prevent a ground invasion. And that's also the limit of their anti-tank missiles. Families are not going to go back home and sit in their garden in Metula or Rosh Hanikra or Kiryat Shmona and play with their kids in the pool with the threat of an anti-tank missile hitting their backyard. A lot of the kibbutzim have been destroyed by these missiles. They fired 5 more today in the Upper Galilee. This is why the Army has said the goals of the war are moving the Hezbollah forces back around 8 to 10 kilometers. Happy to take a question if anyone has. Otherwise, thank you very much for your time and for your attention and your support of Israel.
Jordan, thank you so much. We have time for one question. Let me throw this one out to you. You mentioned the 8 to 10 kilometer band. In terms of where Hezbollah is now, right up against the border, and we know that's not a straight line. Is there any area where it's actually more than 8 to 10 kilometers because of the capabilities of Hezbollah? And can you also explain to everyone why that 8 to 10 kilometers is so important?
Actually, I provided you folks with a map. If you can put the map on the screen for a second, that would be great. They have very, very advanced anti-tank missiles. These are being provided by Iran. Some of them are coming from Russia, and some of them are copies of our missiles. That was a picture of Nikki Haley that I hosted her 2 weeks ago for a tour of the border. And also my good friend Richard Kemp, who's a colonel in the British Army, actually just hosted as well on the border. I sent the IDF spokesperson's office a map in English of northern Israel and southern Lebanon. This is in Hebrew. This will do. The red is the red is the area that's been evacuated. The white is Lebanon. Joe, these missiles, some of them are line of sight, and some of them have cameras on them, and they can go over mountains. They don't need to be line of sight. And their technology is excellent. I don't belittle them at all. And their range right now is 8 to 10 kilometers. Regarding the Litani River, the river is not the Mississippi where it goes north to south. The river is east to west, but it varies. It starts at the finger of the Galilee and it comes down a bit. So that is a natural barrier where we want them behind them. It's also be hard for them to maneuver. As you know, there's 12,000 UN troops in the south of Lebanon, which are not fulfilling their mandate, right? The US taxpayers are paying the UN for this force. And part of 1701 was to make sure there are no armed forces besides the Lebanese army in the south of Lebanon. They are not doing that. And some of the countries there are NATO allies, Italy, France, Spain. So there's something that maybe the U.S. could do to be lobbying to have them get that enforced. I was just given I'm out of time. So thank you very much. And we'll talk again in the future. Be well.